Daily life of the ancient Greeks. Okay, this is section 3 in chapter 6, Greece. Boys went to school. Girls stayed home with their mothers to weave and complete the chores in the house. The girls did not go to school in Athens, only the boys. And after school, the boys went to the training grounds to practice wrestling and throwing the discus and other Olympic type sports. Athletes were training for the Olympic Games also at that time in honor of Zeus. In the marketplace, the Acropolis was the center of religious life. Remember, the Acropolis was the first area in Greece that was settled. It was high up, it was elevated, and was protected. And as Athens grew, the Acropolis then became a symbol to the Greeks. So they built temples and special religious buildings in that square. And that's why it was the center of religious life. Now, the Agora, which was the center of everyday life in Greece, was where all the men went for shopping, for meetings, for discussions, and all kinds of social activities that the Athenian men did. Women were not allowed to go to the Agora. They had to stay home. So, life at home. What kind of houses did they live in? Well, they were made of mud bricks. That's very similar to other civilizations that we studied. The rooms were surrounded by a courtyard, as you can see in this diagram at the top, hidden from the street because the streets were dusty and narrow and noisy, and the wall would probably insulate the sound of the street inside the house. And the houses had kitchens, a dining room, bathrooms, although water had to be carried in from outside in a public fountain. There was no flushing toilets. And their meals consisted of fish, bread, olives, and fruit. And those are the primary foods that are found in the geography of Greece. Meat was a delicacy, and it wasn't often eaten. And that is because there weren't that many animals in the mountains in Greece. They couldn't support as much, it wouldn't support cattle like it does in the United States. So people learned to eat what was readily available to them. Now, slavery in ancient Greece. Slaves did a great deal of work throughout all the city-states of Greece. And Athens had at least 100,000 slaves. I believe the ratio was 1 slave for every 3 Athenians. Many free people were enslaved when they were captured by armies or pirates while traveling on ships. Many slaves were foreigners. So you could be captured from a war and become a slave. So there was a high probability that people became slaves. And the slaves worked in the house, or they would work in the fields, or they helped artisans make their products, or in the mines where they dug for silver and gold. Now, women in Athens had another defined role. Most Athenian women spent their day at home. Women in Athens could not vote or take part in politics. Women could not own property. Women were supposed to run the house and all of the chores, including the slaves. Even though women did play an important role, they were meant to be invisible in society. In other words, they were protected and kept away from the main issues of the day. Now, what are the key ideas to remember? What was life like for men and boys in Athens? Remember, boys went to school, girls did not. After school, the boys went for their exercise at the training grounds, where they practiced many Olympic-type sports like wrestling and discus throwing. Men mainly went to the Agora, which is the market, where they shopped, talked about politics and philosophy, or just gossiped. What was life like for women and slaves? Women stayed at home. They taught their daughters the chores that they needed to know, such as weaving and sewing. Women also controlled the family finances and the slaves. And slaves were plentiful in Athens. Some of them worked in the home, or on farms, or in the mines, and 1/3 of the population were slaves.